I have poured the Bannow Island.
Bannow Island. I've got the
Bannow Island.
Sheestown 1.1.
So we are live, aren't we? Yeah. So
we are now live. Yes.
We'll talk a little bit more about the Bannow Island in a couple of seconds once you said hello. Hi guys, how you doing?
Good evening, guys. Welcome to our Blether series. So Thursday night, 7 o'clock. As almost always, unless one of us is on holiday. But what a guest we have lined up for you tonight. A little giveaway with the bottles in the background. And in the title as well, a Blether with.
Well, indeed.
It is Mark Reynier, who, you know, I said in the kind of build-up, he needs absolutely no introduction to people who have any idea about whiskey, not just in Scotland but globally. What he's done with Bruichladdich, and now doing at Waterford, and the future developments. We kind of hear that rum lovers are going to get to enjoy his stuff as well. So
yeah, absolutely.
So pour yourself a dram. Let us know what you're drinking. Of course, we are on some of the Waterford. I've got a Sheestown 1.1 dram in front of me just now. One of my favourite of the range. Russell, what have you got?
I've got a Bannow Island 1.2, and I think, and Mark will correct me, I think this is Ed Harper's barley. I think that's the right one. I watched the video just a couple of weeks ago with Ed, and that's one of the things about Waterford. You've got this code in the back. You can go on and find out lots about the terroir. Sometimes there's a video with the farmer taking in the barley that you're sitting drinking as you enjoy the video. So fantastic, just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, the effort that has gone into opening up Waterford to the masses is unreal. We had a tasting with the range through our virtual, and would have been about near the start of the year, and the depth of detail that everyone got into it was the Whiskey Geeks whiskey tasting. It was absolutely outstanding.
Yep.
So we have some guys joining in. We've got David, Phil, Duncan. I think that it's the same order every week of people saying hello.
fastest trigger to the button.
Yeah. Duncan's
David's the fastest finger this week. Sam England. Hi Sam, how you doing?
Evening, boy. Evening. Bonnie Island 1.1 for Phil Dixon. He's opened the Waterford as well, so he's joining in. Duncan's on his bedtime duty. Does that mean you started too early, Duncan? You're away to bed already? Hopefully not.
I think he's got the wee stories to read first and the wee ones.
Yeah. So without further ado, you're not here to chat to me and Russell. Let's bring Mark online. And as always, this is the tentative technology-dependent moment. Yes, we are here. Good evening, Mark. How are you?
Oh, hey, you're on mute, Mark.
Let's unmute you.
Yeah.
Okay.
There
you go. Ooh, heart was thumping there. We're gonna have to get you to do sign language.
Evening.
Hi there.
Evening from sunny Isla. Yeah.
Fantastic. It looks wonderful there. Absolutely wonderful.
It is glorious day. Yeah.
Superb. Well, thank you for giving up some of your time to come and chat to us.
Pleasure.
And as I said, just as the intro when we were off in the virtual green room, you know, we want to find out what makes you tick. We want to find out about Mark Reynier. We will inevitably talk about Waterford. We will talk about your time with Bruichladdich and your history in the wine industry, where you started all, because obviously that has all come about because of your own influences. So it's always quite relaxed. If you've got a dram, it would be great to hear what you're drinking. And guys, ask any questions you would like to know about Mark, the history.
I'm drinking some squash.
Orange.
Good old squash. You can't beat squash on a sunny day.
When Isla's sunny, you have to drink something.
But I have a dram ready. Yeah.
So I suppose in whiskey, you're where it all started, isn't it? On Isla and your Bruichladdich, or was there an influence of whiskey before you? The story that we had.
Yeah. Well, yes, there was. It started. Funny enough, I recounted this story just last night. It all started with the London Wine Trade Fair in 1980 I think it was 94. And I went to see that. I was just starting my own wine company, and I met Jack Milroy. I didn't know that he was a great personage in the whiskey industry, but he stopped me and wanted me to take part in a lucky dip. And little was I to realize that this was going to be a sort of life-changing moment. Because I took part in that dip, we put a card in a hat, and the prize was a bottle of whiskey that was worth £1,000. This was back in 1984-5. And I won the prize. He called me up later that day and said, look, you've won this thing. So come and see me. So I went to see him in Milroy's in Soho. And I thought, this is brilliant. I never win anything. This is fantastic. And he gave me this bottle, and there you go, and took a photograph. And he said, well, whilst you're here, would you like a dram? And I'd never had a dram. I'd never had a whiskey before. I'm from a sheltered wine trade. I'd never. Remember, single malt whiskey wasn't really a thing at this time. That time it was just sort of starting. And so I thought, well, I can't take this bottle, and be rude not to. So I had he had these samples. And of course, I now realize they must have all been Islay single cask samples.
Okay. And
so my first introduction was all this sort of peat and and I thought, Jesus Christ. And I was sort of trying to sort of know and taste them like you would a wine. That's the only way. I thought, how the hell do you do this? And it was one shocker after another to me at that time. And then there was this one that sort of stood out and sang because it sort of had the attributes that you would expect to look for in a great wine.
Okay.
And this was the Bruichladdich one. Yeah. And I thought, wow, this is extraordinary. I've come across a spirit, a whiskey, our own domestic produce, and it's got the sort of attributes of a great wine. And I remember leaving Milroy's and thinking, I'm at the front of the queue. I know something that nobody else knows. And it was at the time of the national lottery starting, and a lot of the promotion was this sort of Monty Python-esque big sort of godlike finger saying it could be you.
Could be you. Yeah.
And I definitely remember leaving Milroy's and that image coming into my mind. It could be you, that you've stumbled across something. And so I then spent time trying to track down a supply. This time, so Hawker Siddeley had been bought by Inver Gordon, and you call these people up and they didn't know what they'd got, and do we own that distillery? Oh my, it was that sort of thing. And so I thought, if I'm going to stock a whiskey for wine drinkers, this is what it's going to be. Mm-hmm. And so eventually I got a supply. You remember it's that sort of diamond-shaped label at that time, and started stocking this as a whiskey for wine drinkers, and that was all very fine and good, and that was all very successful. And then 3 years later, 1989, I thought I really ought to go and see this place, and so I persuaded my brother to join me. The only holiday we've ever been on together, and it was. And the idea was that we'd play all the island golf courses on the West Coast, every island golf course by bicycle. And so we had to choose 4 clubs each, strapped it to the crossbar, and off we went. And island hopping, fishing boats from one island to the next. It was great fun. Yeah. And then eventually got to Islay and turned up at the gates of Islay, at Bruichladdich. I was very disappointed by what I saw. This rusted, broken down building, in a terrible state, corrosion everywhere, sort of shutters flapping in the wind, very desolate, abandoned place, and not at all what I was expecting. And it had this little sign on the window, on the gates, that had just 4 words, which sort of summed it all up, which said, "Plant closed, no visitors!" exclamation mark. And it was just those 4 words just struck me as, plant, not even distillery, or just plant, and we are closed, exclamation mark, And I saw a guy in the courtyard, and I rattled the gates, and the guy came over, and and I said, "Look, in my sort of London, I've come all the way. I'm your biggest customer. Would you possibly see your way to it, to letting me in and just have a look around so I can take some photographs?" And the guy said, "No, you can fuck off." And that was my introduction.
Welcome to Isla.
Yeah, exactly. So I sort of cycled away, frantically, very, very annoyed. And I thought, I just can't rationalize this. This spirit, this style of spirit. The place, the welcome or not. It just the ramshackle. It just didn't make sense. And I thought, well, I'm going to do something about it. So I wrote to, I think it was Inverurie, and said, "Look, will you sell it to me?" And of course they said no. And that's fine. At least I'd tried. And I thought, that's it. I'd regret it for the rest of my life if I hadn't tried.
Yeah.
And so having done that, I felt, honor satisfied. Of course they were going to say no. Why on earth would they sell a distillery, to some wine guy? And so that was it. I didn't think any more about it. I stopped selling it, disgruntled. But it was something nagging, and sort of, the following year in January, after the Christmas thing, I thought, well, I'll write to them again. I got the same answer, and I did this for 10 years. Every January, I wrote. First of all to Inverurie, and then it was sort of White and Mackay, and then it was Jimby. And my letters getting ever more imploring and desperate, and their replies getting ever more sort of curt. And then suddenly on January 2000, they said yes. Of course, what I now realize is the White Mackay part was being sold off. And so that's when the fun really started. Then trying to get banking and support and complete the purchase, which we managed to do just before the year ended. That's how it started. And then in the process, Murray McDavid, we'd in that 10-year gap, I'd started Murray McDavid, which is named after my maternal grandparents. In fact, one of them came from up Brecon way,
Okay.
So started that. Having met Gordon Wright at Springbank, who just started working for Springbank for his uncle, and together we started this independent bottler. Realizing that you could get on the distribution list of these whiskies that were being offloaded by the big companies when they were trying to rebalance their portfolios. And of course, these whiskies, the first ones that they sold off were the ones that they'd shut down during the oil crisis of 73.
Mm-hmm.
And so these were distilleries that no longer existed. Stocks, that were from what I call the age of innocence, before it all got consolidated, and when barley was barley and wood was wood, and it was a halcyon moment where you were able to liberate stocks of the stuff, cheap as chips, and it was really good kit, and so we started. I suppose this is the first of the French influences, the wine influences. Was we didn't want to do single barrels. Because as you know, some can be very good, and some can be pretty ordinary, and some can be downright appalling, and and of course, in the fine wine world, you don't get single barrel wines. The principle being is that several barrels together makes a more complex, profound offering.
A batch.
And so that's what we did with Murray & David. We started, making up sort of 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 barrels at a time. Different words and different, and it made for really intriguing bottlings, and we did that for a while. And then, during that decade, I managed to buy Bruichladdich, and we ran Murray & David for a bit longer. But by then, the game was up. All those original stocks from the Age of Innocence had gone, and not much was distilled surplus in the 70s. And I sort of lost interest in it, and so we basically shut it down. And then I started doing the similar thing with rum, which was, sort of in a similar position that whiskey had been, that decade, 15, 20 years earlier. So that's what happened. In fact, we sold Murray & David off to, we sold, it's still running, I think.
Yeah. It's still,
we had a tasting with them just a few weeks ago. Yeah, absolutely. What was it about Bruichladdich that made you just not want to give up, or was it just sheer bloody mindedness by that stage, or?
Well, it was, but it's I think it was the style of the spirit. It was that frustration that here was a really elegant, and thanks to the way it was designed. Remember, it was a purpose-built distillery. It and Bunnahabhain were both built in 1881. They were the first purpose-built distilleries. This is when the steam puffer, the steamboat, allowed the transportation of coal, which is much more effective than peat. It allowed the import to Islay of barley. The puffer would beach, and then they'd offload the coal and the barley. And so they were built at the same year as distilleries. They weren't farms or mills that had adapted and evolved into distilleries. They were purpose built. And the Harvey family, the Harvey brothers, they designed it very, very well. There were 2 or 3 inventions that have now been adopted industry wide, including the anti-collapse valve that goes on the side of a still. It was wonderfully thought out, and even today, what's that? 140 years later, it still runs more or less the same as that original design.
They still have the same mash tun in there as well, don't they?
Yeah, poetry in motion, absolute poetry. And the yields are still very good. Despite all the modern distilling things you can do, it was very well thought out, gravity fed, simple but well thought through. So I suppose all of this, partly it's a British thing. It's our product. It's something we make that is world beating, and to be part of that was very attractive. Partly I suppose the fact that it was you remember in 1984, I think it is 1985, 0.1% of whiskey was single malt. And now it's 25%. It was nothing, and it was like it was a secret, and the cat had been let out of the bag accidentally, and I was there at the beginning. I was very lucky to be there at the right time. It could be you. And so with Bruichladdich, it was it was the style of the spirit that attracted me, and then the hopelessness of the situation, which was the challenge, and I suppose putting the two and two together.
I just have an image of if you've seen the Shawshank Redemption, it's Andy Dufresne writing for every year for his fund to get the library started. And then eventually they just give him the check to shut him up.
It was a bit like that. I have to say, it was a bit like that. So I've got some hookhead here.
Oh, lovely! That's the other one that I really want to try. I've just had a nose of the hookhead.
Yeah,
I think it's probably going to be my favourite.
Well. I mean, the thing is, there aren't. The point is, they're different.
Yes.
And this is, some people, find it hard to grasp. We're not making, we're not saying that one's better than that one. That one is that one, and that one is this one. So they're different.
Yeah.
And it's rejoicing in that, that fun of the difference.
It was. We had let's say we had a virtual tasting a couple of weeks, and one thing I picked up on was it's almost like at Waterford you have a full whiskey region, but in one distillery. You can do so much.
Yeah. It's strange how,
like that.
How it confuses people. What's a single malt? Well, these are all single malts. They're all Waterford single malts, but the barley comes from a different place. And of course, it's only the first step. The next step is to assemble all these different single farms, each one with its own identity, derived from where that barley grew. Think of it like a graphic equalizer. Each one has, is a graphic equalizer with the buttons. But some have got the buttons higher up than the others.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So some have more fruitiness, and some more spice, some more clove. It's absolutely fascinating to see and taste, because we can see, because we've analyzed them, so you can physically see what the profile is, and now you can actually smell and taste the profile at the same time. So we can actually start putting things together, which is fascinating.
It absolutely is.
Was it Duncan McGilvery that said to you the best barley in the world's in Ireland? Is that right?
Yeah, dear Duncan. One of those people you meet in your lives, that your life is the better for it. Just crossing paths. And he was a lovely man. He sadly died a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. But he was a farmer, and he'd worked in the Bruichladdich back in the 60s. And it was an evening like this, and we were sitting outside, and he said, that the best barley he'd ever seen in all that time was barley that came from Ireland, and that sort of ultimately sowed a seed, so to speak. So when Remy Cointreau bought Bruichladdich, and I thought, what am I going to do now? And I thought, well, I've got unfinished business. There's more I want to do in this barley. And people go, well, why are you so interested in barley? What's it all about? Well, it surprises me that people even say that, because barley is the primary ingredient for single malt whiskey.
Absolutely.
It's the source of the flavor. It's where the flavor comes from. So surely to goodness, looking to the barley and where that grows and what influences those flavors, that's the interest. But people seem to, either it's willful, either it's deliberate. But don't worry about the barley. Actually, what the industry is doing is, here we're making the cheapest liter of alcohol possible.
Quantity over quality.
Don't ask any questions. And over here, we're going to spin a story and tell you why it's the deluxe greatest thing in the world. And there's this sort of cognitive dissonance between the cheapest liter of alcohol possible and it's a deluxe spirit. And it's that, coming from a wine background where it's far more direct. I just found that really hard. And so, part of what I wanted to do at Bruichladdich was to see what would happen if you grow barley on different soils, different microclimates, and what would happen, to the barley flavor and the spirit. And so when we started it, I think originally we had sort of 2 or 3 farms, and then we soon got up to about 10. And I remember, being in the still house, one Christmas, and we invited those farmers in, and we gave each of them a sample of their own spirit from their own barley. And to start with, they're all standing there, nosing, and then, bit by bit, they start to talk a bit to each other, and and then you'd overhear one farmer saying, "Well, look, Hamish, I saw you sow. We sowed on the same day. Let me, but yours smells different to mine. Why is that? You're a bit sandier down where you are, and up where I am, it's a bit more, peaty, and I guess that's what it is, Yeah, and you actually realize these guys were rationalizing why the spirit was different.
Yeah.
It hadn't left the island. It'd be malted, but and they were justifying it to themselves. Why it was different. They were discussing terroir, and of course this is a word that gets everybody's knickers in a twist, and it shouldn't really, because it's very simple. The problem is that that there is no direct English translation that encapsulates the whole thing. I mean, terroir is a French word, so therefore it's open to being misinterpreted again, willfully or otherwise. Or some people think it's all very highfalutin and sort of poncy and whatever, but it's very simple. It's gardening. It's the principle of how a plant is influenced by where it grows, whether it's the subsoil, the soil, and that's obviously influenced by the bedrock, the topography. The altitude, the orientation to the towards the sun or not, the microclimate, whether it's exposed, whether it's frost prone, all these things that sort of influence how a plant grows, any plant, and therefore its fruit, whether it's a grape or it's a grain.
I suppose if you mentioned terroir in France or in Spain, it's a no-brainer, isn't it?
Second nature, yeah. There's no big sort of oh my word, this is and yet the very word, you mentioned this word, and it divides people. Oh Christ, I'm not going there. It's like oh, that's too complicated. I don't want to know. It means nothing to me. Well, fine, but it means a lot to me.
But there's a quality versus quantity issue as well, and I think you're suggesting that I think we all know quantity is a big thing in the industry. And quality sometimes
and I think the industry, it's an inconvenient truth. When we did a study with the Irish Ministry of Agriculture and Oregon State University to prove whether terroir really does exist or not, and the study shows unequivocally what we all knew, that terroir is a thing. It does exist. And over 60% of the flavor compounds, of which there are over 2,000 in barley, which is one of the reasons it's the most flavor complex spirits in the world, are influenced by where it grows. So then you get people, well, that's the barley, but we do too many horrible things to that barley, so it's going to lose all that. Well, no, it doesn't. These things are immutable. It's in the barley, it's in the new spirit, it's in the mature spirit. Those flavor compounds evolve. It's why we mature stuff, micro-oxygenation through the wood, and they get more and more diverse and more expansive as time goes by. But you'd think that you'd done something heretical, that you'd had the temerity to even think that barley grown in different places might possibly produce different flavors in the spirit. And it's something I found really amusing to see the hostility that some people have for it.
Do you think some of them?
It's something out of the usual, out of the ordinary.
Do you think some of the newer distilleries are buying a bit more into that now? You've got the organic guys at Nick Nean and the likes.
Well, yeah. To be honest, I think if you really want to know, I think it's a lot of people are going. This is the way it's going. People are going to talk about barley. A lot of people would wish we didn't, and because they don't want to have to. Oh, well, it comes from Ukraine, or it comes from Australia, or it comes. Where we're selling a Scottish product, but it's actually its primary raw ingredient is coming from the Ukraine. It doesn't fit the narrative, and so therefore let's not talk about it. It's hogwash. Let me talk about a finish that we're doing over here. Putting lipstick on a pig. So I think there is this industry aversion, and yet what we always know, they will eventually come round and realize that actually this is something very interesting, but they just haven't thought out how they can do it yet.
I think we're starting.
We saw that.
As I said, we're certainly seeing more of a kind of interest and more of a study into pre-maturation, into what goes, shorter fermentation or longer fermentation hours.
Yeah.
And all this kind of thing. People are paying a bit more attention.
Fermentation. You said it. But there again, this is the smoke and mirrors thing. That the narratives that the whiskey industry, very powerful, very successful at its marketing. If you remember, it was all about the glens and the water and the bubbling burns.
That's right. Yeah.
Of course, they're using it's a tap water from the public thing, and the whiskey's bottled in Glasgow anyhow, and it's all the imagery. It's all about place, and where the eagle soars and the monarch of the glen and all those early things.
Yep.
Again, it's a narrative, and as I said, it's barley, it's yeast, and it's water. That's where the whiskey's flavor comes from, and so I think when you have this very powerful industry, very successful industry, it's very good at telling people what to think. And we saw that at Bruichladdich when we started using French oak, and I was ridiculed for it. All the talking heads, all the usual guys. Oh no, you can't do that. You can't do this. And I was going, well, why not? Because the first job I ever had in the wine trade was sending barrels of French oak wines that we'd bottled in London to distilleries in Scotland. I knew they were using French oak. Why wouldn't you? They've been using it, for years and years and years. But to the talking heads, this was an affront. This was like, oh no. And what are they now doing? They're all using French oak. Chateau this, Chateau whatever it is. Because they've worked out an angle, that works to their advantage. So it will follow. It will follow with barley. How could it not? It is the primary source of whiskies, of malt whiskey's greatness. If you look at blended whiskey, column still stuff made from maize, the whiskyness, the whiskey essence is provided by those single malts. That's the flavor of whiskey, and that's what you get with this. With this Waterford whiskey, we're not trying to make a style. It is what it is. But the definition, if someone said, well, how do you describe these different farms? Well, it's all about barley. It's malt. It smells like a bread shop.
Yeah.
It's got this. This is why we say it's barley forward. It's really barley in your face, which to some people is a bit of a surprise. Yeah, but we haven't done anything. We've just distilled it. As you know, the stills we stole from Allied distillers when they were dismantling Dumbarton.
Dumbarton, yeah.
In fact, we've just replaced them like for like with some new ones. So we knew the spirit style is going to be this elegant floral spirit. And the barley is going to be right in your face. and then if you drill down deeper, you then get these nuances of spiciness or fruitiness, which we are starting to build up an idea of what's terroirs, which places are doing it, and sort of basically speaking at the moment, sort of silica-based soils are giving us a sort of clove register. Sandy soils are giving us a sort of dried fruit flavor, and so limestone influenced soils are giving you a sort of spicy, spice flavors. That's as far as we've got at the moment. This is very early days, but we've got an unprecedented amount of data, and it's absolutely fascinating to see patterns beginning to emerge.
Do you find that the moving to Ireland, you're a lot more open to experiment without this kind of traditional in the rules? Would that be a reason why you went to Ireland?
No, that's an interesting point. There is a totally different atmosphere. I think in Scotland, there is that, Scotch whiskey, we know what it's all about. There is that industry might. There is a huge amount of cynicism, and that used to really piss me off. Who the hell are you to decide, on something different? Well, it's my distillery. Why not?
Yeah.
And it was almost like, you're meant to be a guardian. You're not meant to upset the apple cart. You're not meant to, ruffle feathers. You just do what everybody else does. Well, what's the bloody point in owning a distillery then if you can't do what you want to do? And yet, so that cynicism I found very, very stifling. Everything I wanted to introduce, it was a battle to get it across the line, and so so when we were doing these early single farms, the single, we didn't have the resources, we didn't have the logistics that you need, and frankly, we didn't have the desire. It was not what the industry does.
This was at Bruichladdich,
yeah. So it was very, we'll be laughed at. This will be something, So it was imperfect. So with Waterford, I was determined to finance it in a way that would let me do it properly. And in Ireland, there was this openness of, well, why not? That cynicism wasn't there. Why not? Yes, let's do it.
I was going to wonder. So I was just going to wonder the in that kind of why not thing with the finance. I assume the barley that was already there was going into whiskey somewhere.
Well, funny enough, Ireland's is very simple in that basis, because you've got Diageo and you've got Pernod Ricard. Okay. And you've got two malting houses, one affiliated to one affiliated to the other. One's doing whiskey, one's doing Guinness. So, it's very, and if you're a farmer, you're either contracted to one or you're contracted to the other. It's woof, straight down the middle. What we did, getting 35, 40 farmers signed up to grow barley, what was so rewarding was that they were open to it. These guys, well, why not? Because malting obviously is the logistical key. You can have barley growing all over the place, but if you can't store it and you can't malt it, and keep it separate all that time in the right conditions, then you're fucked. Yeah. So the logistics is the key to it, and it revolves around what we call the cathedral in Kilkenny, which is the heartland of the barley growing area. And there, the Dalton brothers said, right, yeah, sure, we'll build you your own warehouse. And so they built us a purpose designed, what we call as an entrepot, to house each of those individual farms, to ensure separation. All these things that we couldn't do on Islay. And they had it up, within 12 weeks. It was fantastic. So there was this tremendous openness to these ideas. It wasn't a battle, because they don't really have a whiskey industry. It's Pernod Ricard, it's Jameson's, 80%. One company, and so they were more open to new ideas.
Yeah, fantastic. I just love that whole idea. I mean, how do you feel Waterford's been accepted within the Scotch industry then, or do you still think it's ruffling feathers?
Well, I think that there's certainly. I think there is that pride in Scottish whiskey, which sometimes for some people doesn't leave room for anybody else at all. So there's certainly that. Mm-hmm. There's some, certainly of the old, rivalries. But to be honest, if you're a whiskey fan, if you are a whiskey fan, it's borderless. There's lots of interesting things happening, south of the border in England. There's 30 malt whiskies coming along in Ireland, and there's Alsace, France. There's lots of things happening, and I think that's all very, very encouraging. And a lot of these people are, again, as I said, if you're going to build your own distillery, do it yourself. Why would you just copy what the industry does? Surely the reason you're doing it is because you want to try something slightly different. So I think we're going to see a lot more interesting spirits, interesting whiskey coming out. Different takes, different views on it. Very much like you have with the brewing, craft brewing.
I think
where the big guys
really
know but the big guys know that the little guys can only ever be craft, so they're not a threat. So they leave them alone.
One of the fantastic things is actually the thing I've loved about it is going on to these, putting in the codes and going on and discovering about the farmer, discovering what it is. There's another distillery, the High Coast Distillery in Sweden, that give you a huge amount of information. I mean, sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming, the amount of information, but it's just about getting time to try and digest it and try and.
Well, you're right. I mean, we've designed our own system that brings together 5 different, so farmers and the system that they use, for agronomy, the malting house, the distillery, the warehouse, and the cathedral, and it brings all of these systems together. And yes, we've got over 8,000 data points per whiskey. It's a huge amount. Diageo, remember, it was a Guinness brewery built in 2004. It's full of data collection, for efficiency purposes. But of course, you can reinterpret that. Yeah. And so it gives us you're distilling in real time. You can actually see what's happening as it happens. Dear old Bruichladdich, you put the barley in one end and whiskey came out the other, and heaven forbid you touch anything. It just works through. Whereas here it's the other way around. I never thought. I thought all this technology. Where's the art of distilling? But what you actually get is the chance to actually intervene. Once you know how it all works, and you can see, extended fermentation. I mean, that is one of the most fundamental things about the distillation process, the whiskey making process, and yet nobody wants to talk about it. That's where the flavor is liberated. If you got it in the barley, the whiskiness, liberating it, getting at it is during fermentation. And yet everybody wants the photographs of the stills and the iconic imagery of the stills.
Yeah.
But really, it's the fermentation is where the action is.
Yeah.
Distilling just confirms it. Distilling is chemistry. It hasn't changed since 800 AD when alcoholic distillation was first invented in Syria. It hasn't changed. The machinery's got a bit better, but it's the principle hasn't changed. Separating spirit from water. But fermentation is where you get at the actual flavor compound. So this is something I learned in the 80s and 90s in Burgundy when they were the renaissance of the Burgundy and Bordeaux vineyards. After decades of cooperative winemaking and wine lakes and everything, when they were getting back down to the terroir, back to the basics. And it was this discovery that that if you extend the fermentation by cooling it, preventing the temperature rising quickly, and having a sort of all over and done with fermentation in a day, if you can keep a lid on it, you can extend it 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, and the more you extend it, the more intensity of flavor you get. And this is what they learned, thanks to Australians, thanks to Americans in the wine world. And I saw this happening, and it always struck me that we've got the same thing here. We've got the malted barley. We're trying to access those flavor compounds to ferment. Why do you want this high density fermentation that's over and done with in a day, very volatile? The reason they do it is because of space, efficiency. Yeah, fine, I get that. But what happens if you extend it? And you get this, as I say, you get this intensity of flavor, which again surprises people. Not only do you have this wonderful barliness coming out, thanks to the rather odd way we mash at Waterford. So we get total terroir extraction, and then we ferment it over a long period of time, 6 days. I mean, this is the sort of information that's on the website. You can see, and you get this intensity of flavor. So you get the barliness from the mashing, you get the intensity from this extended fermentation, the purity from a very small middle cut, which of course, again, distillation, nobody ever really talks to people about what's going on. You take lots of photographs and, that's great. But, the middle cut, by taking a narrow one, basically 10 degrees ABC, you get literally a more refined spirit. It's not rocket science, but it means we lose some spirit. I calculated it's about 60,000 liters a year that we could make that we choose not to. Okay. Because we want that flavor, we want that refinement, that elegance. So really, looking at it all,
and do something different with it, like a Waterford liqueur or something like that.
No. It's gone. So we are not trying to make the cheapest liter of alcohol possible. We're trying to make the most flavorsome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's just a different look at it, a different way of operation. And I respect and I understand why the industry works as it does. I don't have a problem. That's fine. And, that's not a problem. But it doesn't mean you just want to be allowed.
You want to be allowed to do something different. And I think what you're saying is that sometimes when you do that, or certainly in Scotland, doing something different is frowned upon. Whereas you should just be able, if you own the distillery, you should be allowed to do what you want within certain parameters, I guess.
Well, I mean, of course, in Ireland, the SWA, the Irish version of it, is not terribly. The SWA, as you know, has got 150 people in it, and it's a whole industry alcohol lobbying body. The IWA has a couple of girls and a fax machine. But basically, I run Waterford along the SWA rule book. They've been around long enough. They know what the tricks are. They know how it should be done. So I follow what they do.
We have a question. Sorry, just to
sure.
catch up. We've got a question from Phil Dixon, who's a regular watcher of ours. Can you explain the concept of a micro cuvee?
Yeah, well, it's the single farm origins are the components, and of which we have now 100, 35 different farms. Well, some of the farms we follow each year, others have we've dropped by the wayside. We found other ones that that can do a better job. So in total, we've got about 100 different single farm origins. Certainly 35 per year. So each of those is slightly different. But the idea is a wine idea. The great wines of Bordeaux are what's called assemblage. They're assembled from lots of component mini wines. So you have the Grand Vin of Château-Latour, grand meaning big, because it's made up of 40 or 50 little wines. Each one is cultivated separately, harvested separately, influenced by the terroir on which it grows. It's put into barrel, and 18 months, 2 years later, it's then assembled to create the big wine. This is the principle of the cuvée, which is coming out this next month. So the single farms are the components that go together into this compote that it's called the cuvée. Cuve is a French word for a vat, for a tank. And so the principle being that the whole is even greater than the sum of just the individual components. That's the principle. This is taking it to a different level. This is the aim of Waterford, to create mindfuckery. The most profound flavor of whiskey that's possible. So unashamedly, I've borrowed this Bordeaux or Champagne, this Bordeaux concept of assembling. Think of it like a chef. The great chefs, they don't go and empty the kitchen and put it all in a big pot and then go, here you are. Mm-hmm. What they do is they prepare all the different bits separately, and then at the last minute, bring them together on the plate. And here you are. So you have purity and of originality of all the individual components. And as a whole, they make a meal that's more interesting than the individual bits. This is the principle that we're doing here. So a mini cuvée is sort of a trial that our head distiller Ned has come upon, a bit of playfulness, where he's found bits and pieces that work really well together. And what I wanted is a bottling, a sort of seasonal bottling. That it's a bit of fun, they weren't taking ourselves too seriously. So it's almost, we've done 3. There'll be a 4th. So we've got a winter warmer, which as you'd imagine is a spice, sort of oak influenced spiciness. And then we did this winter we're doing one called Half this autumn, which is sort of, again, it's the idea is it's that, when the hour goes back and, the sunlight goes and everybody battens down the hatches, and you just want something a bit more, autumnal, and then, the one we've just done, Picnic, which again is, I love drinking whiskey outside. This is, we were talking about this earlier, on Isla, it feels good to be outside, on the shore, drinking. So this one is a bit more verdant, a bit more lively, a bit more sort of sort of summary. It's a bit of fun.
Yeah.
It's a bit of fun. And so they're not very big. They're just small bottlings, and we'll repeat them over time. But they're sort of, they've got a purpose. They've been designed specifically for that sort of autumnal thing, that the Christmas mulled wine thing, the freshness of being outside, the cut grass thing. That's all. They're just
absolutely
playful,
love the sound,
fun.
Yeah,
it does what it says on the tin.
Absolutely love the sound of it. I mean, for me, with what's previously been available, it's usually something that's ex-bourbon that I like in the summer, so that light malty, grassy, and then in the winter something a bit more heavy and sherry. So again,
but why not? But why not? Why should we be? Why should everything be sweet and heavy? This is something I felt very strongly about. At Bruichladdich was why not? It's how we engage. We drink the stuff. So why should you have one and that's it?
Yeah.
Why not adapt it? You don't go to a wine shop and say, "Oh, give me one wine, and that's the same wine I'm going to drink for the rest of my life."
Absolutely.
You go, "No, give me some rosé because I'm going to have a picnic," or give me some Aussie red because I'm going to have a barbecue. Give me, well, I'm going to seduce somebody. Give me something romantic. Give me, give me a pudding wine, or give me some. I'm celebrating
absolutely.
champagne. Why can't you do that with whiskey? It just struck me as very odd that we don't actually. We're in the we got all these barrels here. Why not create bottlings for circumstances? The way it's going to be drunk. So if you want something that's a brooding, a late night dram, that fine, we can do that. And this is what we had fun doing with Bruichladdich. If you want something that's that you're going to drink in your kitchen with a farmer whilst there's a howling gale outside. You want something that's going to be more frivolous, more fruity, more fruit driven, that you can dilute quite well because you don't want to get shit faced at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So a time and a place for everything. Why not?
So you're going to bring out a sparkling whiskey then for celebration?
We did a rosé at Bruichladdich, and we got sued by a gay club in Amsterdam because the name we used for it it contravened a trademark they owned. And so we got sued by a gay club in Amsterdam. But I mean, I just think that I understand why when we started with Bruichladdich, there was one Laphroaig, there was one Lagavulin, there was one this, there was one that, and I understand why. Now, I'm very pleased to say that there's several, Lagavulins, there's several Laphroaigs, there's several. So you start to see a segmentation, but I think you can go further. I think with a bit of adroitness, a bit of care, a bit of attention, you can assemble, different emphases. To create a whiskey that appeals to a specific, what I was finding, in my early days, we were drinking all these legendary old whiskies, but what's the point in having a really old, mellow, rich, powerful, emotive whiskey when you just want to have something, lunchtime, it's too complex, it's too much. You haven't got the time to give it. So I think there's horses for courses. There's plenty of opportunities to, if you're interested and you have access and you have access to your stocks, to experiment.
Having grown up in the wine industry, and I would love to know a little bit about what you wanted to do when you were younger. I mean, I guess was that kind of exposure to wine at a young age kind of push you in that direction? But that's a kind of slightly second question. But the first one was going to be: are you now focused primarily on whiskey? Is that where?
Yeah, sure. No, I sold my wine interests. I couldn't do both of them. You can't run a Hebridean distillery from London, and you can't run a London wine business from a Hebridean Ireland. So something had to go. So I sold my interest in wine. But it strongly informs what I do. It's in my blood. As a family, we were never allowed to start eating our Sunday lunch until we guessed what the wine was in the decanter on the table.
Yeah.
A discipline, I thank my father for. It's fantastic because it really made you think about what you're drinking.
Wow.
A fantastic discipline. And it's something that I carry now. I can't pick up a glass without smelling it. Your brain wants to know what's going on.
Yeah.
But we're on our whiskey tours or doing a tasting, I often find myself opening the water bottle and smelling it and thinking,
it's water.
I do it with milk. I do it with exactly. Some things you frankly wish you hadn't. So I think that there are. So I've got a problem with what is this torch? How do I turn the torch bit off my phone? It won't go off. Oh, there it is. Good. So I think so. I went straight into the wine industry. My father's business, which was at the end of an era, the end of London bottling, the end of the London bottling era. It had been the London bottling had been compromised by wine scandals, people putting stuff in bottles that they shouldn't do, and so that business it sort of had come to the end of its advantage. London bottling was an advantage. Now the French were bottling wine, doing it themselves, and so all the opportunities had sort of dried up. And so I joined when this was ending, and as an 18-year-old. I think sort of a forlorn hope of my father that something would change, and but it didn't. He ended up selling it to a brewery in the West Country called Eldridge Pope, who made fantastic ales, traditional ales. Sadly, they've got subsumed into Bass Charrington. But that's my first whiskey experience. Was helping the master of wine, a guy called Joe Nolte. Helping him create the brewery's own label whiskey that was used in all their pubs. And a very evocative moment. I remember it absolutely vividly, going into this damp cellar, and the wall was lined with butts. Remember them? Sherry butts, real sherry butts, and these were butts of Highland Park. I can remember, and taking the bungs out and emptying them into this vat, to make and the headiness, the aromas, the dampness of the cellar, and the moldiness of the cellar, and the intoxicating aromas of this sherry influenced Highland Park. I mean that was a hugely important memory. But as you've all done, there's different bits of your life. But it's only when you stand back and you look at them and you go, oh yeah, shit, that's influenced that. But I probably didn't know it at the time, So the wine world, and of course Burgundy, in a country where everybody drinks Bordeaux. I was brought up to understand Burgundy, which is, it's not fancy chateaus and suits, and it's farmers, with dirty hands, a very different exercise. So that's what I immersed myself in, and I happened once again to be at the right place at the right time when the Renaissance of Bordeaux, the Renaissance of Burgundy happened during the 80s and 90s, with the third post-war generation had gone to Australia, they'd gone to California, they'd learnt the science of winemaking, and they came back, kitted up with stainless steel, extended fermentation, all these things. The exploration into wood, it all started then. Barrels were barrels or barrels. But in the 80s, you started getting the oak from different forests, different shoats, different toastings. And this was very, very interesting to see the impact on wine. And remember, wine, 12, 13, 14% alcohol, and not 70. So it was a very informative experience. And I was lucky to be there at the time. And so it informed my first half of my career, 1980 through to 2000. And then 2000 to now is my whiskey career. So half in wine, half in whiskey.
And then rum in the future.
yeah, rum. I mean, Christ, that's hard work.
I bet you, yeah.
So if we renovated a Victorian distillery with Bruichladdich, we converted a state-of-the-art brewery in Waterford. Grenada was a chance to build something from scratch. Again, having sort of wandered around the Caribbean and the Pacific looking for a distillery to buy, I realized there was nothing to buy and that I'd have to build something. So that's taking it a step further. And if Islay is for some of you is remote, try a Caribbean island, where you really are in the middle of nowhere. So it's blood, sweat, and tears and toil. It's been a lot of it. I can tell you, it's been very hard work, but we finally got there. And the first spirits are now here. Will go on sale next month. They are tentative. Again, the concept of terroir with sugarcane. Again, very interesting to see the differences. So the first 5 bottlings are of 5 different terroirs, and the idea is really is just to show people what we're doing. But what we found is actually most of it, all of it's been sold already into the market. And what people are doing is, well, actually, as pre-cask, as white spirit, it's not aged, it's pre-cask. That there's an interest in using it for cocktails and things like that. But the aim is to mature it. That's the aim. The aim is to mature it and produce a cuvee style rum in 3 years' time.
Yeah, I think with rum it's such a rabbit hole, isn't it?
Well, yes.
And largely,
as far as I believe,
unregulated. It's kind of
it's totally. I mean, there's 90 countries that make rum, and the vast majority of it is made from molasses, which is the debris that's left over after you've made sugar. So it's always been something for nothing. It's always been a happy-go-lucky. You're winning something back. The gold was the sugar, and this is something. So it's always had this frivolous thing. It's never really had a terroir because you're not growing. It's the syrup, it's the stuff that's left over, and of course you can make it anywhere in the world, and they do. All you need is those blue drums of molasses, all coming from the same central pool. So there can't be any provenance. Everybody's using the same raw ingredient, which struck me as being very odd. So I wanted to copy what the French do, Martinique and Guadeloupe, who actually distill the cane juice itself. And the reason they do that, incidentally, is because Admiral Horatio Nelson blockaded during the Napoleonic Wars, and they couldn't get their sugar back to France. And so they just distilled the juice instead.
Is that more of an ethical?
So we've got Lord Nelson to thank, for cane juice rum, but of course that's where you get the real interesting flavors. coming, from the cane. And of course, the cane is a plant. It's influenced by where it grows. And on a volcanic island, you've got this extraordinary juxtaposition of soils because of the pyroclastic, stuff. It creates these wonderful little areas to grow cane, which if you think barley is barley grown on different farms, Christ, cane grown from here to there. It's extraordinary, the difference. So it's fascinating, and the idea is is to lay it down and then to assemble them to create the complexity. The point being is, how do you make the most complex rum possible? And again, using this Bordeaux concept of where the whole is greater than merely the sum of the parts.
Yeah. So
it's the same
in
principle.
terms of size, forgive my geographical ignorance, you've gone from Islay, which is a relatively small island, to Ireland, which is quite a big island. How does Grenada compare?
Grenada, it's got a population of 100,000, and it's about the size of the Isle of Wight.
So we're going back the way. We're going back the way.
Back there.
Yeah, Atlantic Islands. I like them. Yeah.
It's just what I love it, going right back to the start of the chat tonight about Duncan and his comment about the Irish. We always think in Scotland that the best barley grows down the east coast because it doesn't get that Atlantic hit.
Correct.
And it's just amazing how the Irish can grow.
And also, it's more fertile. Don't forget.
Yeah.
So what if you transpose Waterford and our key areas? It would be like going to the borders here in Scotland. And remember, Waterford. If I go due south out of my house here, if I go due south, in fact, due south, straight down. You come to Waterford after 210 miles. It's the same latitude as Cambridge.
Yeah.
You're in a rain shadow, and yet you've got the marine ameliorating. It's the sunniest part of the island. We tend to harvest down there normally, not this year incidentally, but normally a month, 6 weeks before they even start up here. So it's much easier to grow barley down there. And it's all glacial, so you've got really fertile soils. So growing here on the Hebrides is very difficult because you can't get on the ground to sow it and prepare it until April or May because it's so wet. So the growing season is relatively short, but the daylight hours are longer, which compensate about 2 weeks. But then you're into harvesting it at the end of August into September, and then you're risking the autumn gales and the arrival of the geese from Greenland, that hoover it all up. So actually, it is actually the window is not very big. Growing barley here in the Hebrides, but obviously on the east coast, in the borders where it's really fertile, your red sandstone up where you are, those soils are very rich, very, very fertile. And it's the better part for growing.
A lot of our guys have just harvested in the last kind of 2 weeks. Actually.
This year's really weird. This year's really weird. It's been a really slow spring, as you know. The drought conditions, the cold air. The grass just didn't start growing until the beginning of June. So it's been a very odd year. In fact, it's brought the south and the north almost together, harvesting wise.
Slightly off on a tangent, I was just thinking about Waterford and my previous job before Mike employed me to work in the shop. I used to work in the NHS, and I met a young guy from Waterford that I used to work with a long time ago. And when he started working with us, we're talking about guys from the northeast of Scotland. I mean, you're doing very well to understand us tonight. I think maybe Mike and I are trying to make sure we're understood. But this guy came from Waterford, and we literally could not understand the word he said. So
well, try Grenada. Try Grenada. Devon, our head distiller there, I just nod. I can't understand a word he said. But it's. So what's your point? Your point is
wondering how are you managing to what the Waterford is the accent down there still is
No, it's not. It's easy. I mean, Ned, our head distiller there, he said to me, "Well, what do we? What's Waterford meant to taste like? What are we meant to be doing?" And I said, "Well, it is what it is. There isn't we're not looking for it is what it is."
Was Ned,
so really,
he was a brewer before, wasn't he?
Sure.
Just transferred into
Sure, absolutely. So really, as I said before, and it may seem heretical, it may seem sacrilegious, but the distilling bit is actually quite easy. Fermentation, the rest of it is more. More important. I think the emphasis is put in the wrong place. So for him as a brewer, he understands it, very, very well. And distilling is, we call it alchemy. Actually, chemistry. It's pretty straighthtforward. I don't want to disappoint everybody, because the industry's gone around saying it's all this magic that happens. Well, it isn't. It isn't magic.
The stills are the most photogenic part of the tour, aren't
they? Yeah. But boring old fermentation that you can't see, that's where the action is.
I quite prefer being in the fermentation room, to be fair. I do like the washbacks.
That's been. I mean, I dare say we could go on. I think we've scratched the surface of Mark Reynier tonight in that hour and 15 minutes. Thank you so much. We try and keep it tight because we want people to come back for more. We don't want people to get bored. Not that we would ever get bored of
Campbellton.
Campbellton. Yeah. But do you remember Mary Whitehouse?
Yes.
I don't mean the pornographic magazine. I mean the campaigner.
Yes.
There was a thing back in the 70s when they were wondering, about what you could show on TV that was permissible.
Yeah.
And there was this thing about for males, what are you, boobs for, but what can you show of male genitalia? And there was this thing, obviously you can't show hard on, and that would be, absolutely not on, So they came up with this idea about, how flaccid.
It should be as flaccid as the Mulligan Tower.
But they needed, so to speak, a yardstick to judge it, and it became known as the angle of the dangle. And the angle of the dangle was based on the Mull of Kintyre.
You've almost got Aaron looking like the testicles behind it.
Well, exactly. The angle of the dangle, and that's what it became known as. That's what's permissible, nothing more. So on that point,
we were talking to Ian McAllister from Glasgow a few weeks ago. We should have brought that up with him.
Yeah.
I often use that as when we were talking to we do a lot with Americans when Scotland is open to tourists, and when we talk about Campbellton, I always refer to it as the flaccid penis at the end of the West Coast, and it purely as an eye.
Very good golf courses. Springbank Distillery.
Not bad visit, yeah, absolutely,
yeah. And a new one planned.
The Kintyre, Benatir, is it? My pronunciation is probably all wrong.
Well, I can't possibly say. No. There's another one in the pipeline.
Nice.
Early days.
Oh, superb. Well, we will keep quiet about that.
So Campbelltown, becoming, once again, do you remember it used to have 32 distilleries?
As it should be.
Because of the coal field that they used to have the open mine coal. So that's that thing about the different distilling areas. That was all to do with licenses, and Campbelltown with 32 distilleries was a one licensed area.
Yeah.
Whereas Isla, Isla had 22. distilleries at one point. So that's what those distilling areas were. It was controlling licenses. It wasn't a stylistic thing at all.
No.
There's a new book out with I can't remember. Is it the Coldtown or Caltown dialect, which is part of Campbell. That's a particular dialect. So they're talking about languages and being able to be understood. David Muir, one of our regular listeners, he'll be listening tonight, so he'll be able to comment on that.
Have you read this?
I haven't read that one.
No.
Yeah.
I must do so. Bob Arnold, yeah.
Yeah. American study, but again, very interesting. Reasserts the work that we're doing and what's happening in America with bourbon but primarily beer. And,
we talked about that. We talked about that book with Ian Forteeth. That was one he got, because he was one of these. Ian at Tom and Towel and Glencadam. He didn't believe in a terroir, but he's saying slowly he's buying into the idea. And there's a young master blender coming up.
But this is the point. The default position is no, see no evil here, no, don't want to. But it all makes sense if people are just prepared to just listen and engage. But I know there are going to be people that just don't want to know. They've been told, year in, year out by all the talking head, the whiskey guys. This is what happens. That's poppycock. This is poppycock. This is nonsense. Drink this. And so they don't want to know. Well, fine. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think to me, whiskey is there. If you're curious and you want to know a bit more, if you want to understand a bit more, well, why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
I think the information. There's more and more people giving the information. There's yourself, the Bruichladdich, Compass Box, all these guys.
But do you remember when we first started Bruichladdich, you weren't allowed inside a distillery. At Isla, you couldn't even go in them. The first thing we did was we put video cameras around the distillery so people could see what we were doing. So things have moved along a lot in 20 years.
Didn't that get you a phone call from the CIA though?
Yes. Oh Christ, that's
the weapons of mass destruction, isn't it? Yeah.
And Mossad too.
And Mossad, oh really?
Yeah. A different story, that one. Christ, yeah. I mean, you couldn't make it up if you tried. But no, I think transparency is terribly important to me. This is what we're doing. We think it's really interesting. Come along for the ride. Share with us. We're not saying we've got all the answers. We're only learning, how these things are impacting. But we find it absolutely riveting. And we share it with everybody. So it's all there. It's all there. It's open book.
Absolutely, it's been absolutely fascinating. And guys, if you've got a bottle of Waterford, or if you want to buy one, it's our bottle of the month this month. Check the labels. Go on the website. The amount of information that's available is
that's the Terroir code.
Yep.
Where is it? There.
Yep.
At the bottom there.
Yep. Bang on. Yep.
So and there's a different code for every bottle, whether it's a 1.1 release or a 1.2 release. And
the 1.1s are the first. The 1.2 they're a bit older, and of course as we get older, the whiskey gets older. It gets more compelling, more interesting.
So the first one is the yield, and the second number is the
first number is the farm, and whether it's the first time we've done that farm.
Use that farm, So that yield of barley from the farm.
And then the second digit is the bottling. So the 1.1s we ran out of really quickly. So we did a second bottling. So they're about 3 or 4 months older, and it's amazing to see what 4 months does.
To do the side by side,
quite extraordinary. And then we've got coming up the first biodynamic whiskey, which I'm very, very pleased with. This is uber organic, and it's going to. I believe it's the finest spirit I've ever tasted.
Wow.
It's extraordinary, and that is something that might take off. The idea of biodynamics, regenerative farming, taking it to another level. After all the chemical abuse that's gone on in farming, since the Second World War, First World War. So that's another addition to our Arcadian series. It includes the organic, the biodynamic, the heritage barleys. As we go backwards, looking at the origins of whiskey flavor, when barley hadn't been propagated to buggery, and there were flavors that were original and now lost. So going back the way, what we want to do is start breeding our own barley based on, heaven forbid, flavor.
Yes.
Outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like you say we're quite new into this journey, and there's a long way to go, and it can only bring some good, great whiskey to us. Yeah,
discussion, and debate, and an observation. I know whiskey can quite often be a bit like football. I'm an Arsenal supporter, you're a Chelsea supporter, and well, no, I think it should be really, if you're interested and you're intrigued, to stimulate discussion, to stimulate shared experiences of the different nuances and things. I think it's intriguing, and I hope, and I believe, that more and more people are, wanting to know more. They're wanting to understand more. What happens? Why not? And that's what we hope to answer.
I certainly hope that Waterford is more successful than your Arsenal team are looking at this season.
I was going to say, to use that analogy, it's maybe more about the beautiful game. And I love this time of year when the barley's been harvested and the smell of the air.
Yeah.
I stop at the side of the road just to smell the air. I think it's
I get really excited, and this year's going to be a really good barley year. It's the nitrogen levels are really low, 7, 7.5. It's going to be a really good year for barley, and I find that fantastic. We haven't even talked about vintages and barley vintages. Some are good, some aren't, less good, but they're all different. And you see all these trailers running around, and you think, well, might that be something that one day I'll get a drink?
Absolutely.
I find it absolutely. I love it. I love
to see.
So for us,
Andrew Mackenzie Smith from Lindors has just commented there. Super. And what I love about the Lindors Abbey is they've made a commitment to the 2 neighbouring farms that they're only going to buy barley from that 2 farms, and that's it.
Yeah.
So
well, it's amazing, and everybody, the farmer loves to see his barley going somewhere. We like to see the essence of that farm in a spirit, and it's just fascinating. And of course, barley harvests overlap, or rather are out of sequence with the calendar year. So if they're harvesting now, it goes into dormancy, and then it'll be malted probably in February or March. You can't distill it until Easter time. So the barley harvest year is sort of 3 months out of sequence with the calendar year. So there's often you've got to be a bit careful. There's an overlap quite often. That's another story. For another time.
Yeah, and I hope you come back for a part 2.
Pleasure.
We love that.
Just we've got Keith Duncan asking, and this is a far easier question to ask than to answer. As a first-time buyer of Waterford, what should you go for?
Well, as I said earlier, they're all slightly different. I'd try and pick up the 1.2s just because they've got slightly more age to them. These are young whiskies. They're sort of 4.5 years. The cuvee will be 5. But what it does show is that if you distill slowly, if you use really good barley, if you ferment really well and extend it, you can make whiskey that is extraordinarily good at a young age.
Yeah.
We learned this at Bruichladdich. So it shouldn't really be a surprise to people anymore. This idea that it's got to be 10, it's got to be this. Not really, not anymore. Not if it's done the way I've just described.
Yeah.
So I think we're all going to get used to drinking much, much younger whiskey. Age, does it matter as much as the marketing guys would like you to believe? I think distillation and attention to detail is more important. So the answer to the question is which one? Well, I don't know. If you can get hold of Gattenbrook, that's a wonderfully balanced, self-contained bottling. Hookhead I like a lot. That Hookhead won some prize in America. Grattenbrook is just wonderfully balanced as a spirit, as a farm. Bannow Island, I like the sandiness, of the soil there. It ups the fruity side of it. There's a bottling we did in Germany, Tinnerstruhl, which is another the organic guy. I love the organic.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. That is not a single farm. That's 6
that's
farms.
Coming together of it.
Yeah, because coming together in grain, because none of them were big enough. But so we do now have single farms.
That's almost your blended malt version, isn't it? It's
a blended malt grain. It's a blended grain.
Yeah.
Blended grain. Because none of them were large enough to distill on their own. Mm-hmm. But we now have 2 single farms organically, as well as those small farms that we bring together. No, it's good. Hopefully you can't go wrong. I think they're all intriguing. But what you want to try and do is compare and contrast.
Yeah.
So if you buy one, get a friend to buy another, a different one, and compare and contrast. That's where it's really fun, really interesting. Add water. They're all at 50% ABV. Obviously not chill filtered or colored or anything like that at all. So do add water. Feel free to add water. I think people can often be a little bit stingy on that front, and don't be. You won't break the flavor because they're natural whiskies. You'll only dilute the alcohol, and we bottle them at 50%, knowing that you're going to add water. So don't be scared to do that.
Excellent. Murray, that's been an absolute great insight to you. Thank you very much for giving up your time on Thursday night and joining us.
No, thank you very much.
Not at all. I'm going to go and have dinner. And bon appetit to everybody. And thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I've loved it. So anytime, just give me a bell and we'll carry on. Lots more to talk about. Good grief.
Thank you so much. Mark. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Good grief. See you again.
Thank you very much, Mark. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow. So, guys,
I'm going to retire now. That's it. I'm done.
What a host of information. I think we need to go back and watch that and listen again, because so much going on there was incredible. So what do you say after that? We've done an hour and 35 minutes. Thanks to you all for coming on. Keith Duncan, thanks for asking that question. That was good. And so basically his answer is you to get the good out of it, you've got to buy one of each. So I'll expect your order in.
Got to buy them all. Listen, we don't have that many left, guys. Get the orders in.
We do have the Grattan's book 1.1.
I'm gonna have to break my embargo.
Right.
And actually buy a bottle. I've just had these sample sets tonight, and fantastic. I started in the Bannow Island, which was fantastic. The Sheestone had a slightly different, sharper taste to it, which was okay. But the Bannow Island I loved. The Ballymorgan was like barley sugars, just absolutely super sweet and beautiful. And
I started with the
Ballyclare Cabin.
And the middle one I actually had was the Grattensbrook 1.1.
Okay.
And but it's the Sheestown. I don't know. When we did a tasting of it before, it was probably my standout. But having it first, I got that kind of astringent kind of note to it.
It came the saltiness of the Bannow Island was beautiful, and then I went on to the sharpness of the Sheestown. So probably the wrong way around. If you're gonna, I guess it's that you've got to discover the whiskies before you know which way to do the tasting.
Yeah. I think if we ask, when we ask Mark back, we might do a 9 o'clock start. The language.
Listen, we've already got a couple of they're up there for my kind of
right. But what an evening! Yeah,
got to drop some of that into conversations.
Next week, great news for you guys next week. Unfortunately, I can't make it, so Russell will be blethering with Stuart Buchanan next week. So from obviously
all things Brown-Forman.
All things Brown-Forman, Inverurie, Glenglassaugh, and Glendronach are our local guys. So looking forward to next week. That should be. It's Stuart's he's always up for a laugh as well. He's great.
I'm sure he'll talk about Tobermory and Mull and being Gordy's brother and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I know we always ask him what it's like being the least famous brother.
He said it was funny because he replied to that. I said I found myself. I was actually the day after he said he would say yes. I dropped him a wee email saying I was just watching Gordy on TV. I was having my bacon roll on my way into work, and he was on the TV in some godforsaken part of the world diving with sharks. And I thought, I can't understand how you guys went in so many different directions. To him diving in oceans with sharks, and you working with whiskey. And he said, you know what? Sometimes I think I'd rather be Gordon facing down a lion than talking to a whiskey drinker. And I thought, actually, you know what? There's maybe something in that. There's a simple thing to deal with a lion, but there's so many questions comes out of a whiskey drinker. So.
But that's what Mark's getting at there is, the information has to be available because that's the questions that people ask. Certainly now, 30 or 40 years ago.
So the best thing you do is bombard them with so much information that you can't answer a question.
Yeah. It's on the website. There you go.
I mean, the whole thing, guys, once you get your bottle of Waterford and go into it, you'll see the breakdown of the soil type, all the chemical constitutes of the soil type. I mean, it's fantastic. I look at it and I go, wow, that's amazing, but what the hell does that mean? But then every day's a school day, so you've got to start learning. So
I remember being a tour at Glendronach, and it was a group that we were hosting, and Karen. It was when Karen was there, McWilliams.
Oh, yeah.
And we got into the talk of tour guides, and the fact that a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them are almost scripted, and it's the same thing.
My name's Craig. Yeah.
You seen that video? Glen Tulloch Distillery.
That's peat in this, which means it tastes like dirt.
But if you ask a question off of the script, they would have to find it out. But I agree. The most amazing part even is we managed to get some information. Yeah. I dare say we could have just said, introducing Mark.
We like a challenge. I got most of my questions answered. I had a few questions. There's a lot of ticks down the side, so I did get most of them in. But
we did get onto a bit colour and sherry finishing and cola bombs. So anyway, back to my
story, Karen.
So Karen was saying that every tour guide on Glendronach at the time had to know the ins and outs. She goes, if somebody asks me what the soil content of the earth used to grow the barley, then they would have to know. And she went off on a rant about this. And so at the end of it, she was like, so does anyone have any questions? So me, the cheeky bugger at the back, says, so what's the soil content in the barley? And she told me, like, whether it was true or not, I'm not a farmer, I had no fucking idea if it was right or not.
That's it, just hit it with some shit.
She told me. So I was like, can't argue with that. That was it. But that's the dedication that somebody like that brings to it, is that people know, you need to know more than what's on your script.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean that's but completely, and seeing all that stuff in that information sheet just makes me want to understand that even more.
Yeah.
The whole barley concept. I was talking to a neighbour the other day, actually just looking to book some tastings, and she said her partner grows barley for distilleries. I'm like, right, I need to meet him.
Yeah.
And I need to meet him very soon because I want to go and top barley. I want to go stand in the field. I want to go and learn all about what he's actually doing.
Yeah. Well, that'll be part of our upcoming Whisky Academy.
Academy, absolutely.
Highland Whisky Academy is we'll go meet some of the Aberdeenshire farmers growing the best barley in the world. The granary of Scotland as we know it. So hopefully we can get that.
Apart from Ireland, Ireland's better, but ours is the best in Scotland, I suppose.
That's only an opinion. And guys, it's been an absolute pleasure having you along. We could literally have talked to Mark all night, I think. And
if he wasn't wanting his dinner, I think he'd have been happy to stay on all night as well.
The dedication wasn't there. I've got half my dinner sitting down beside me because I had to shove half of it down my.
You're not Mark Reynier, so mate.
No, that's very true. One day.
One day
we could dream of being there.
Absolutely.
But, guys, enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a great weekend. Join us or join Russell next week.
Yeah, please do. With
Stuart Buchanan. We've got a phenomenal September lined up. Obviously, just waiting on confirmation from some guys, but I think some of the guests coming in September will be fantastic. So keep tuned. We'll continue as long as you guys are watching. We'll be blessed.
Yeah, we'll keep at it. We'll keep trying.
We might have to change it to Havering at some point.
So the Haver, not the Blether, the Haver.
The Haver. The Havering. That I was watching the Proclaimers on the telly a couple of weeks. Was it a couple of days ago?
And the
story of the Proclaimers, and it got banned in some American states because they didn't know what havering meant, and they thought it was a sexual kind of. Rude. I'll be havering with you. Yeah, they didn't. So they just said, "Well, that must be rude. We'll ban it."
No, I'd say actually just been pissed and speaking shite. That's
yeah. So there's a wee bit of useless information, nothing to do with whiskey, but that'll be our parting chat for tonight.
The Haver. We'll move on to the Haver for next week.
We went from 16 viewers right down to 8 just on that point. So
I know.
So we'll stop now. Cheers, guys. We'll see you soon.
See you next week. Cheers.